Okay, this will be a video showing you how to, first of all, install minitab, and then we'll go through some, the layout of minitab, and then an example from our PowerPoints on how to use minitab. So hopefully you can see my screen. This is our Canvas course. If you go into modules, you'll see here I have under Getting Started a minitab section. And it says once you've registered for minitab, directions sent to your JSU email, you can use this link to access the cloud minitab. So you should have all received an email from customer service minitab if you want to search for that. If you didn't receive the email, please let me know. I can resend the link or add you as a user if you didn't get the email. But once you get the email and you go through the process of logging in, it will take you through My JSU to log in. You should be able to go to the Cloud Mini tab, and I just went ahead, if you can see here, and I've saved it as kind of a quick tab or bookmark. And every time you'll pretty much have to sign in with your credentials. And it'll take you to My JSU. This is all safe, I promise. We have a site license to minitab for all of our students. And once you get to this screen right here, you want to go to open the web app. Now, you may, let's see, trying to make sure. Some of my students in class, they saw a different screen at first. But you want to go to, if this doesn't come up when you log in, you should have a screen that has a few options listed, like maybe 6 in a grid. You want to go to the products, and then you want to go to the software. So click on the link that says software, and then you may see this if it doesn't show up immediately. And then we want to use the web app. Do not download the desktop app. We don't give out licenses for that anymore, so it's pretty useless. I don't even have any, but we can open the web app, and this is how minitab will look. Okay, so hopefully you have been working in Excel between the labs and the Excel videos from the textbook. But I just want to show you minitab is an alternative statistical software analysis program. So it was designed by statisticians for statisticians, and I think it's really powerful. I'm surprised it's not used more widespread, I guess due to the licenses being very expensive. That could be a reason. But minitab is very powerful, and it has a lot of new features that are always added. And I really like using minitab. I use it in practice when I have to do projects here on campus. It's what I choose to do. So I just want to show you minitab here. You've got your results window up here. And this is your spreadsheet window, which I'm not sure why my lines are not showing up. I hope I don't have something turned off. Ooh, I don't want to do that. But usually it'll have the grid line so it looks like a spreadsheet here. So it must just be a setting I have. But you can change the layout if you want. You can, of course, make this, larger. I like to have more spreadsheet area. There are also some view changes down here in the lower right-hand corner. If you want to see just data only the spreadsheet. If you want a split screen with your results window, or if you just want to see your results. So that's kind of nice. You have some options there. But the main thing I want to make you aware of is that when you're using minitab, it already has each column labeled as C1, C2, out to technically C infinity. And if you want to add an additional label, you'll have to put that here in your row 0. So if you're inputting data, and let's say we want to do ACT score and gender. Now, as soon as you start typing in the cloud version, it wants to know where do you want to save your product. So you can, or save your project, not your product. You can call it anything you want, and you can save it directly to Microsoft OneDrive, or you can continue without saving, which is what I'm going to do here. You can save again at any other time. You can also save to your Google Drive, but that's going to be kind of a hassle since we already went through the My JSU, and we have Office 365 here. So I'm just going to continue without saving right now. And let's say we also want to look at somebody's gender when we're doing that. So I'm just going to start pretending like I know data. My one's not working. There we go. So I've got some data listed here, and then I can also add, you know, for participant 1 who scored a 19, their gender, we'll just use F for female, where's male, we're just making this up. And I just want to make sure that you see here that when I started typing in a letter or a word response, my column here renamed itself as C2-T. Now this T signifies that this is a text column, which means it will never show up as an option for calculating summary statistics because it's got categorical variable. You can't find the mean, median, mode, or standard deviation here. But with that said, if you ever are working with minitab and something is listed as a -T and you want it to be numeric data, sometimes the best thing to do is just to start over, or there are options where you can transform the data so that it becomes numeric data. But minitab is pretty picky, and so if you've accidentally typed in a text value in this row 1, I would suggest just deleting the column and starting over again to making sure it doesn't retain that text feature. Okay, so anyway, we've got some data here. We're not going to spend much time with edit data. We will spend most of our time with stat. When we get into probability distributions, we'll use a little bit of calc, and then we will learn more and more graphs as we go along through the semester. So I'll show you what we've done so far. Okay, so again, this is just data that I've made up. This is where I've entered data myself. We call this raw data. It's in a data array. And as a statistician, I'm talking to you. When you see raw data, what you want to do, you should be thinking, I've got to analyze this. I've got to know where the mean, median, mode is. I've got to know how many are female, how many were male. That should really be something like you're just very curious to find out. Now, I know I only have 10 observations here, and we could probably guess at where the median is, and we could probably count up how many females and males that we have. But what if we have, 1,000 observations or even 50, right? That would be really hard to do. So thank God we have software that can handle these types of things. So if you've watched the Excel, it takes you through enabling your data analysis tool pack where you can get summary statistics. So I'm going to show you how to do that here in minitab. So if you go to the stat and you go to basic stat, the first option is to display your descriptive statistics. And that's what we want to do here. Okay. Now, if your cursor is not blinking in this open variables box, nothing will show up over here. Okay. And then a lot of people are like, oh no, I've done it wrong. No, if this is not blinking here, go ahead and click in here. And once you click in this white space here, it'll tell you the variables that you can use for descriptive statistics. So note when I click in here, the only thing that I can choose is ACT. Gender is not an option. Why? Because gender is a text variable, is a categorical variable. It is not going to show up as a variable that we can compute values on. Okay, so I just want to see the ACT. You can double click and it will bring that value over, or you can select and then hit the select button and it will bring that value over. All right. If you go in here to statistics, you can check which ones you want to see. So we've looked at mean, standard deviation, variance, the coefficient of variation. We've talked about interquartile range. We've done mode, range here. We have our number N. So that would be a good start. So basically anything we haven't really talked about, you probably don't want to see. But anything we've talked about in the notes, it would probably be useful for us to go ahead and add those. And I will say, it's not necessary that you go in here into statistics and add, if there's something that gets reported that you don't want to know, that you don't know, or you don't want to use, you just don't report it. Okay, so you can see here in our results section, we have the results of the summary statistics for ACT. So the first thing listed is a variable, which is the ACT, which is what I named it. If you don't have a label here, we'll just call it C1. This N here means how many observations. I had 10. N star in minitab stands for number of missing observations, and there were no missing observations. We had all 10 ACT grades reported for each of our observations. The mean is the average of all 10, so 19.2. The standard deviation is 3.155. Now remember, if we square this thing, we'll get variance. The coefficient of variation is our mean divided by our standard deviation. That's not right. Is it? Let me stop and do the calculation real quick. Okay, minitab's correct. I got the formula backwards. The coefficient of variation is when you take standard deviation divided by mean and then you report it as a percentage. That's how minitab chooses to do it. So 3.155 divided by 19.2 is 0.1643, and so that's how we get a coefficient of variation value of 16.43. The minimum is 14, so the lowest ACT score was a 14. The highest was a 25. And then the middle value was 19. So remember, mean and median, if they're close, we have evidence that maybe we have a symmetric data set. Excuse me. We also asked for Q1 and Q2. Remember, we're talking about the quartile. These are the values that are the cutoff value. So 25% of the data, or 25% of our observations, scored less than a 17.5. In this case, 75% of our data scored less than 20.75. So this represents the 75th percentile and the 25th percentile, and we give those special names. The IQR we talk about, and that's when you find the difference between Q3 and Q1. So this is where most of our data will be, and how wide is it. And then we have the mode here, 18, 19, and 20. So we have 3 modes here. And the N for the mode here means that each of these values occurred twice. Okay, so that's kind of how you can do some descriptive statistics in minitab. Also, if we have gender here, when you're using Excel, there's not a really good way to do a straightforward summary statistics by a categorical variable. You pretty much have to filter or use count ifs or if functions. But in minitab, it's very easy. So if we go back to the stat, basic statistics, display descriptive statistics, we're still going to have our ACT as our variable. But if you click down here and by, now gender shows up. And so we can find the average ACT score and all the summary statistics by gender. Okay, so I can double click and it should go down there, and I'll just hit OK again. And now I have the ACT score split up by gender. And you can see we happen to have 5 of each, still no missing. And I just put this in, you guys watched me, I was just making it up as I went. But it does look like in this case, this made up case, that females have a higher ACT score on average than males. So a 20.2 for females and an 18.2 for males. We see their standard deviation broken down, variance, coefficient of variations. We see that for females, they have a higher minimum and they also have a higher maximum. And the range is a little bit larger for females, so we have a wider range of values than are for males. And there's a mode of 20 for males and there's no mode for women. So pretty interesting. It's a little bit quicker, and on your applied exam you do have to do summary statistics, both we call these overall statistics and statistics by a variable. Okay, and the navigator pane over here is real nice because the first analysis we ran was for overall statistics, and you're also allowed to rename these. I like this, so you could even call overall, just to keep it straight for you and me. I like to. This, well, I'll never see this, but if it helps you, that's great. So overall ACT statistics, and then we could call this one ACT stats by gender. And so now you can just click back and forth. Before this update, you would have to scroll and scroll, and if you had a lot of analyses, it could be hard to find what you were looking for. Honestly, most of the time I would just rerun it because I didn't have time to look for it again, and it's so quick to run. So this is a good overview of how to use minitab. While we're here, I also want to show you the graphs. So we've talked about scatter plot. we have talked about histogram, we've talked about stem and leaf, we've talked about box plot, we did a bar chart and a pie chart. So we will include more of these as we go, but there are quite a bit that should already look familiar to you here. So we'll just start with the first one. We can't use a scatter plot because, and this is a good test question, because you have to have two quantitative variables against each other. We have a quantitative variable, ACT, and a categorical variable. We cannot use the scatter plot. Okay, so that's that's not something we're going to choose. We haven't talked about any of these, so don't worry about those yet. We can use a histogram, we've talked about that, but we can only use a histogram for the ACT variable. So when you have one variable, we're going to do a simple, and we will double click ACT and hit OK. And you can see here we have a histogram of ACT. We have to scroll. All right. Minitab does an okay job, but it's not my favorite when it comes to giving a title, and it's okay. I prefer the axis labels are okay, but I would prefer a more informative title. So that's where you can go to graph options and you can change the title here. So overall ACT scores. Right, you can add a subtitle if you want. You can add footnotes. You can move the position of your axis label, right? So if you want it up high, it'll put it up here. That kind of looks weird, or you can just turn it off altogether. I don't recommend that. Same with the Y label, and you can give this another value, another name. So if you want to call this the count, I guess, count of score, if you really want to get detailed, but frequency is fine here. The scales, this is where you can adjust how you want your box plot to look. So this one has 6 intervals. We can change this to any number, and you can't break it, so feel free to play along. So this is what happens if we move it to 10 intervals. We could do 5. You can see it looks a little different. So really just depending on what your preference is. Mine, I told you earlier, I like to see things in increments of 5 or 10. That's kind of what I like to do. You can also do custom midpoints and cut points, so you can actually pick what you want these values to be here. You can change your Y scale to be percent. So now you don't want to update this. Is no longer the count of scores. This would be the percentage. So 20% up here. The fits, you could superimpose a curve. We're not going to be there yet. Lines, we do want these on. Labels. If you wanted to add the values so that you didn't have to draw the, I think that's a bit much, but some people prefer that. And then orientation, you can always flip this thing 90 degrees and make it look this way. But most of the time we do see histograms in this form, which I would call vertical. Now the one thing I'm still working on, and I'll have to get back to you, is, what if you don't want a blue bar? Like, we all are different. We all have different personalities. So what's to say that we can't have a different color bar? And so I think I need to do a little bit more research on that. Because I don't see where you can change the color. So bonus points to anybody that can figure that out for me. That'd be awesome. But the nice thing about any of these graphs, and this is true of Excel as well, is that you can copy the graph and you can put it anywhere you want into a Word document. Why is that important? Well, you're going to have to do an applied exam, and I'm just going to do Control V here. And you can paste it in and resize it into any program, preferably Word here. And again, I was hoping we'd have options, but I can't. I'll figure out how to change the color, because on your applied exam, I would prefer that you kind of give me your own personality and you choose your own color scheme. Okay, so hopefully this helps. A lot of people want to avoid using minitab. I really get it, but I think you'll find that when you're graphing, minitab can be your friend. You don't have to do as much pre-work as you do in Excel to get the graph that you want. But I understand too that this is kind of information overload. And so if you've been working with Excel and you like Excel, that's fine. I'll continue to post these videos, and if they help, I'm so glad. And if you just need to ignore them, you can do that as well. Okay.